3 months after the failed conspiracy, Sarah stood nervously in front of the combined council of human and Kraxan relations. Her intern badge had been replaced with something much more impressive: Assistant Cultural Ambassador. "This is ridiculous," she whispered to Vexthor, who stood beside her in polished ceremonial armor. "I'm only 17. Age means little," he rumbled back. "Actions mean everything." The council chamber was packed with both humans and Kraxans. After the truth about the conspiracy had come out, both sides had realized they needed to understand each other better. And somehow, Sarah and Vexthor had become symbols of that change. "The Cultural Exchange Garden is ready for inspection," Sarah announced to the council, trying to keep her voice steady. "If you'll follow me." She led them to what had once been an empty greenhouse level of the embassy. Now it was something entirely new. The massive doors slid open, revealing a space where human science and Kraxan tradition had been woven together. Battle flora grew alongside earth plants, their shimmer steel leaves catching the light. Human students sat cross-legged on the floor while a Kraxan warrior taught them the basic forms of battle dance. In another corner, Kraxan warriors listened intently as a human botanist explained genetic structures. "As you can see," Sarah said, "we've created a place where both our peoples can learn from each other. The battle flora here is grown using both traditional Kraxan methods and human botanical science. The results have been amazing." She gestured to a particularly beautiful plant, its leaves swirling with patterns of gold and blue. This variety was developed by combining Kraxan warrior plant genetics with earth medicinal plants. It can heal wounds twice as fast as anything we had before. Vexthor stepped forward. "And here, human students learn our sacred battle dances while we learn human sciences. Both make us stronger." A small Kraxan child, the first ever allowed in the human section of the embassy, was carefully watering a row of plants under Sarah's battle flora's protective leaves. The plant had grown enormous, its shimmering canopy stretching over a quarter of the garden. 3 months ago," Sarah continued, "someone tried to use our differences to start a war. But look what happens when we work together instead." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a seed, one from her own battle flora plant. Walking to the youngest council member, a human woman, she held it out. "This is how trust begins," she said, "one small gift at a time." The council member took the seed carefully. Then, to everyone's surprise, a Kraxan council member stepped forward and held out a traditional warrior's bracelet to Sarah. "You have shown us that strength comes in many forms," he said. "You will teach others what you have learned." Later, after the council had left, Sarah sat with Vexthor in their garden. She looked at the warrior's bracelet on her wrist, probably the first ever worn by a human. "Did you ever think," she asked, "when you were bleeding in that maintenance tunnel, that letting a small human help you would change everything?" Vexthor's laugh rumbled through the garden. "Did you think stopping to help a dangerous alien warrior would make you an ambassador?" "No," Sarah grinned, "but I'm glad I did." Above them, human and Kraxan children were learning to grow battle flora together, their laughter echoing through the garden. It was a sound never heard before in the history of their peoples. Sometimes the bravest things we do lead to places we never expected. And sometimes those unexpected places turn out to be exactly where we needed to go. Sarah's hands were shaking as she cleaned the wound on the Kraxan warrior's side. The medical scanner in her kit showed the injury wasn't life-threatening, but it was deep. Someone had tried to stab through the warrior's armor and almost succeeded. "I am Vexthor," the Kraxan suddenly said, his deep voice surprisingly gentle. The universal translator made his words sound slightly mechanical. "You show great courage, small human." Sarah tried to smile, even though her heart was still racing. "I'm Sarah Chen, and I'm not that small. You're just really big." To her surprise, Vexthor made a rumbling sound that might have been a laugh. "True words. You are the first human to ever treat a Kraxan wound. Most of your kind run when they see us." "Well, most of your kind don't hide in maintenance tunnels with stab wounds," Sarah replied, then immediately worried she'd been too bold. But Vex Thor just made that laughing sound again. As she applied the healing gel to his wound, Sarah noticed something strange. The armor plates near the injury were covered in tiny patterns that looked almost like, "Are those plant designs?" she asked before she could stop herself. All four of Vex Thor's eyes widened slightly. "You recognize battle flora patterns. Most humans see only scary decorations." Sarah's face lit up. "I'm studying xenobiology. These look like the defensive patterns of the thundervine from your home world. We have some samples in our lab, but they're all dead." Dead. Vex Thor sounded offended. Thundervines should not be kept in labs. They are warrior plants. They need respect, challenge, combat to grow strong. For the next hour, as Sarah finished treating his wound, they talked about plants. She learned that Kraxans used living plants in their armor and weapons. What humans studied in labs, they grew in sacred gardens. Every warrior had to raise their own battle flora from seeds. "But why were you attacked?" Sarah finally asked. "And why are you hiding instead of going to your own people?" Vex Thor's expression grew serious. "I am here on secret mission. Some Kraxans do not want peace with humans. They think it makes us weak. I discovered their plans, but they found me first." He touched his healing wound. "My own battle brother did this." Sarah gasped. "We need to tell someone. The embassy security." "No." Vex Thor's voice was sharp enough to make her jump. "There are traitors on both sides. That is why I hide. That is why I must heal and finish my mission alone." Sarah stood up straight, all 5 feet of her facing down the seated 12-foot warrior. "You're not alone anymore. I can help. I know this embassy better than anyone. They make interns clean every corner of it. You would risk much, small human." "Why?" Sarah thought about it. "Because you're nothing like what they told us Kraxans were supposed to be. Maybe there's a lot more both our people need to learn about each other." Vex Thor was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into a pouch on his armor and pulled out something that looked like a seed. "Among my people, warriors share battle flora seeds to show trust." He held it out to her. "You have warrior's heart, Sarah Chen, even if you are very small." As Sarah carefully took the seed, she realized this was probably the first time in history a Kraxan warrior had willingly given anything to a human, and all because she hadn't run away when she was supposed to. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay and listen when everyone else says you should leave. Sarah had never been good at lying, so when Dr. Martinez asked why she needed extra medical supplies from the xenobiology lab, she nearly dropped the whole box. "Just restocking the first aid kits." Her voice came out too high. "You know, being prepared and all that." The head scientist raised an eyebrow, but didn't stop her. Sarah hurried out, her heart pounding. This was her 3rd supply run this week. Someone was bound to notice soon. The maintenance tunnel felt different now. What used to be a boring shortcut had become her secret path to the abandoned testing chamber, where Vex Thor was hiding. She'd helped him move there after that first day, knowing the maintenance tunnel was too exposed. But today, something was wrong. The door to the chamber was slightly open. Sarah froze. Vex Thor always kept it sealed. Always. She pressed herself against the wall and peered inside. The massive form of her Kraxan friend was there, but he wasn't alone. Another Kraxan warrior stood before him, even larger than Vex Thor, with deep red armor plates. "You shame us all, brother," the red-armored Kraxan was saying. "Hiding here like prey, consorting with humans. Tell us what you know of the plan, and I will give you a warrior's death." "The only shame," Vex Thor replied, his voice hard, "is plotting to destroy the peace our ancestors died to build." Sarah's hand tightened on the medical box. The other Kraxan had a weapon, some kind of energy blade that hummed with power. "Then you choose to die a traitor's death." The red-armored warrior raised his blade. Without thinking, Sarah slammed her hand on the emergency fire suppression button next to the door. Instantly, white foam sprayed from the ceiling, filling the room. She heard shouts of surprise and confusion. Security breach in testing chamber 7. The automated alarm blared. Emergency protocols engage. Sealing chamber. The door began to close automatically. Through the foam and chaos, Sarah saw Vex Thor slam into his attacker, knocking him off balance. The red-armored Kraxen roared in fury, but the foam had made the floor slippery. His energy blade skittered away as he fell. Vex Thor didn't waste the chance. He burst through the door just before it sealed, grabbing Sarah with one massive hand. They ran. "They will know I'm not alone now," he said as they rushed through the tunnels. "You should not have revealed yourself." "What? And let him kill you?" Sarah was still shaking. "That was the one who stabbed you before, wasn't it?" "Yes. Krarthul, my former battle commander." Vex Thor's voice was grim. "He leads the faction that wants war with humans. They plan something at the peace talks next week, something that will destroy any chance of trust between our peoples." They reached another abandoned chamber, this one deeper in the maintenance level. As they caught their breath, Sarah realized something. "That's why you were in the tunnel that first day. You were trying to get proof of their plan." "Yes." Vex Thor touched the now-healed wound in his side. "But Krarthul caught me first, and now he knows I have help." Sarah should have been terrified. She just made an enemy of a Kraxen war commander. If she was smart, she'd run to security right now and tell them everything. Instead, she pulled out the battle flora seed Vex Thor had given her. In just a week, it had sprouted into a tiny, fierce-looking plant with shimmer steel leaves. "Well," she said, trying to sound braver than she felt, "then we better figure out their plan fast, because I'm not letting them start a war just because they're afraid of change." Vex Thor looked down at his tiny human friend with all 4 eyes gleaming. "Together then, brave one. May our ancestors forgive what we must do next." The abandoned terraforming station wasn't pretty, but it was safe. Sarah had remembered it from an old maintenance report, a failed project that no one visited anymore. Now it was their new hiding place. "What is this thing you're eating?" Vex Thor watched with all 4 eyes as Sarah slurped up her instant noodles. "Raymond, want to try?" She held out her spare cup. "It's not exactly fine dining, but it's what I could sneak out of the cafeteria." The sight of a 12-foot Kraxen warrior carefully holding a tiny cup of noodles made Sarah wish she had a camera. Even funnier was his face when he tried to use the plastic fork with his massive fingers. "This is strange," he said after a careful taste, "but not unpleasant, like eating warrior worms, but softer." Sarah nearly choked on her noodles. "Please don't tell me what warrior worms are." As they ate, Sarah played some music on her pocket tablet. She'd been sharing different Earth songs with Vex Thor, trying to explain human culture. Today it was classical music. This sounds like our war songs," Vex Thor said suddenly, listening to Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. The pattern of challenge and response, the building of tension, even some Kraxen battle dances would fit this music. Sarah sat up straighter. "Battle dances. You have dances." "Of course. All warriors must learn the sacred forms." Vex Thor stood up, his head nearly touching the station's ceiling. "Watch." What happened next left Sarah speechless. The huge warrior began to move in a way she never thought possible. Each gesture was precise yet flowing, like water but with explosive bursts of energy. His armor plates caught the light as he spun and struck at invisible enemies. "That's beautiful," she whispered when he finished. "Beautiful." Vex Thor seemed confused. "It is meant to be deadly. These forms teach us how to fight. Can't it be both?" Sarah stood up. "Show me how to do it." Vex Thor's laugh rumbled through the station. You are too small for Kraxen battle forms. Then teach me the small movements. The hand gestures." She mimicked one of his poses. "Unless you're afraid I'll learn all your secrets." For the next hour, the strange pair practiced together. Sarah could only do tiny versions of the moves, but Vexthor was surprisingly patient. He adjusted her arms, showed her how to shift her weight, explained how each movement told a story of ancient battles. Your people record history in books and videos, he explained. We record it in our bodies in these dances, each form passed down through generations. That's why the extremists hate the peace talks, isn't it? Sarah realized. They think getting closer to humans will make them lose these traditions. Yes. Vexthor's voice was sad. They cannot see that sharing our culture makes it stronger, not weaker. Sarah thought about this as she tried another move. Maybe that's what we need to show them. That humans can respect and learn from Kraxan traditions, just like you're learning about human things. Perhaps. Vexthor watched her practice. But first we must stop their plan. The peace talks begin in 3 days. Sarah nodded, continuing the dance form. She might be the smallest person ever to learn these movements, but that didn't matter. What mattered was proving that humans and Kraxans could share their cultures without losing what made them special. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to help save the peace. Sarah stared at the strange plant sample under her portable microscope. She'd borrowed it from the lab, along with some other equipment that was now spread across the floor of their hideout in the terraforming station. This doesn't make sense, she muttered, adjusting the microscope's settings. These cell patterns, I've never seen anything like them. Vexthor leaned down to look, though the microscope was comically small in his massive hands. These are from the documents I stole before they caught me. Battle flora samples. But they're wrong. Sarah pulled up another image on her tablet. See, normal battle flora has these defensive structures. But these samples, they're all attack patterns, like they've been changed somehow. Vexthor's 4 eyes narrowed. Changed. No one can change battle flora. The plants are sacred. Well, someone did. Sarah scrolled through more images. And look at this chemical signature. It's designed to affect human nervous systems specifically, like a weapon. The Kraxan warrior went very still. The peace talks. They plan to use changed battle flora as a weapon against humans. Sarah nodded grimly. But there's something else weird. These modifications, they use human biotech methods. Methods that only a few labs in the embassy know about. She pulled up another file on her tablet. See these authorization codes in the lab records. They're from human scientists, high-ranking ones. Vexthor's massive fist slammed into the wall, making Sarah jump. Traitors on both sides, working together. But why? Sarah looked up at her friend. Why would humans help create a weapon that could hurt their own people? War prophets, both sides weapon makers, Vexthor growled. And some humans fear our growing peace as much as Karfel does. They would rather see conflict than change. Sarah thought about the tiny battle flora plant she'd been growing from Vexthor's seed. In just days, it had learned to trust her, opening its shimmer steel leaves at her touch. Like her friendship with Vexthor, it proved that change wasn't something to fear. The peace talks start tomorrow, she said. They'll probably release the weapon through the embassy's ventilation system. It's the only way to affect everyone at once. Then we must stop them. Vexthor stood, his head brushing the ceiling. But the security will be highest it has ever been. Every warrior and human guard will be watching. A slow smile spread across Sarah's face. That's exactly why we'll succeed. Because nobody's looking for a teenage human girl and a Kraxan warrior working together. She pulled up the embassy's maintenance schematics on her tablet. Look! The ventilation control room is here, near the main conference hall. During the talks, all the guards will be focused on the delegates. Nobody watches maintenance areas. And if they do? Vexthor asked. Sarah pointed to her growing battle flora plant. Then we show them what happens when humans and Kraxans work together instead of against each other. She started gathering her equipment. I'll need to get some things from the lab first. Neutralizing agents for the weapon, just in case. Can you get us into the control room? Vexthor's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. Small human, I could break down every door in the embassy, but your way of sneaking is probably better. Sarah grinned back. Tomorrow then, we save the peace talks, or die trying. Preferably not the dying part, Vex Thor added. Definitely not the dying part, Sarah agreed. But as she packed her bag, she knew tomorrow would change everything, one way or another. Getting past the first security checkpoint was easy. Sarah just walked through like she belonged there, wearing her intern badge and carrying a box of plant samples. Nobody looked twice at her. The hard part was smuggling a 12-foot Kraxan warrior through the embassy's back corridors. Crouch lower, Sarah whispered, peeking around a corner. Your head spikes are showing. Vex Thor grumbled but hunched down further behind the massive air processing unit. This is not dignified for a warrior. Being dignified won't matter if we get caught. Sarah checked her tablet. Okay, the next shift change is in 2 minutes. That's our chance to reach the maintenance elevator. She touched the battle flora plant she'd brought, now growing in a small pot in her sample box. Its shimmer steel leaves bristled at her touch, ready to help. She'd spent all night teaching it to respond to specific signals. The elevator would take them up to the ventilation control level, right above the main conference hall where the peace talks would begin in 1 hour. But first, they had to get there. Now, Sarah whispered as the guards moved away for shift change. They rushed forward, Sarah's small feet silent, while Vex Thor somehow managed to make his huge form move quietly behind her. The elevator needed a maintenance key card. Sarah pulled out the one she'd borrowed from the lab and swiped it. Nothing happened. They must have changed the codes, she muttered, trying again. Still nothing. Heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. Guards returning. Vex Thor didn't hesitate. He simply grabbed Sarah, sample box and all, and lifted her up to reach the maintenance hatch on the elevator's ceiling. Open it, he rumbled quietly. Sarah's fingers found the emergency release latch. The hatch swung open just as voices rounded the corner. Vex Thor boosted her up through the opening, then somehow squeezed his massive frame through after her. They found themselves in the elevator shaft, clinging to maintenance rungs along the wall. Sarah's heart was pounding so hard, she thought the guards below must hear it. Could have sworn I heard something, one guard was saying. Probably just the air systems, another replied. Their voices faded as they walked away. Sarah let out the breath she'd been holding. That was close. Now we climb. After you, small human, Vex Thor said. I will catch you if you fall. The maintenance rungs were slippery with dust, clearly unused for years. Sarah's arms ached as they climbed higher and higher. But every time she looked down, she saw Vex Thor right below her, ready to help. Finally, they reached the ventilation control level. Sarah peered through the access grate into the corridor beyond. 2 guards, she whispered, and they're wearing air filters. They must be part of the conspiracy. Then they are enemies of both our peoples. Vex Thor growled softly. Let me handle them. No, Sarah touched her battle flora plant. I have a better idea. One that won't set off any alarms. She whispered to the plant, just like she practiced. Its leaves began to shimmer and release a fine, sparkling pollen. Cover your nose and mouth, she told Vex Thor, pulling on her own filter mask. The pollen drifted through the grate. Within seconds, both guards were slumped against the wall, snoring peacefully. Sleep pollen, Sarah explained, seeing Vex Thor's surprised expression. Mixed with some modified battle flora properties. They'll wake up in an hour with no memory of falling asleep. Clever, Vex Thor rumbled approvingly. You fight like a Kraxan, but with plants instead of weapons. Sarah grinned as she pushed open the grate. Come on, we've got a peace talk to save. The ventilation control room's door stood before them, its security panel glowing red. Through the thick walls, they could hear the muffled sounds of the peace talks beginning in the conference hall below. Ready? Sarah asked, holding her modified battle flora plant. Before Vex Thor could answer, a deep voice spoke behind them. I knew you would come here. They spun around. Carthol stood at the end of the corridor, his red armor gleaming. 4 more Kraxan warriors flanked him, all wearing breathing masks. "The human child who corrupted my former brother," Carthol growled. "How fitting that you both die together." "Sarah," Vexthor said quietly, "get inside and stop the weapon. I will hold them." "But..." "Go." Vexthor charged forward as Sarah turned to the security panel. Behind her, she heard the crash of armor against armor, roars of combat, the hum of energy weapons. Her fingers flew over the panel, trying to hack it like she'd practiced. The sounds of fighting grew closer. A body, she didn't look to see whose, slammed into the wall beside her. The panel beeped and turned green. The door slid open. Sarah rushed inside and froze. 2 human scientists stood at the main control panel, one she recognized from the embassy labs. They were installing something that glowed with sickly green light. "Don't move, Sarah," Dr. Martins said, pulling out a stun weapon. "You're too smart for your own good." Outside, the sounds of combat continued. Sarah clutched her Battle for a pot tighter. "Why?" she asked. "Why help them make a weapon against your own people?" "Peace makes us weak," the other scientists spat. "Humans need conflict to grow stronger, to evolve." "You're wrong," Sarah said. "Real strength comes from working together. Like this." She thrust her hands forward, sending a mental command to her Battle for a plant. A command she and Vexthor had practiced for hours. The plant's leaves exploded outward, releasing a cloud of shimmering spores. The scientists fired their weapons, but the spores formed a protective shield around Sarah, just like Vexthor had taught her. The Battle Flora had merged human science with Kraxan warrior knowledge, creating something entirely new. The scientists stumbled back, coughing despite their masks. Sarah ran to the control panel and began pulling out connections. The door crashed open. A Kraxan warrior stumbled in. But it was Carthol, not Vexthor. His armor was dented, but his energy blade hummed with deadly power. "You dare use our sacred Battle Flora against us," he roared. "No," came Vexthor's voice. He appeared in the doorway, wounded but standing. "She honored our traditions by learning them truly. Unlike you, who would corrupt them for hate." Sarah's hands found the main power coupling for the weapon. "This ends now." She yanked it free. Sparks flew. The weapon's green glow died. Carthol charged forward with a roar of rage, directly into a cloud of Sarah's Battle Flora spores. The massive warrior staggered, his blade dropping from nerveless fingers. What is this?" "A new kind of Battle Flora," Sarah said. "One that protects instead of harms, because that's what real warriors do." Through the observation window, she could see the peace talks continuing below, unaware of the battle that had just saved them. Human and Kraxan delegates sat together, talking, sharing ideas. "You see," Vexthor said to his former commander, "this is true strength, not destroying what we fear, but growing stronger by learning from each other." Security forces were finally arriving, drawn by the sounds of combat. As they burst in, they found something unprecedented. A human teenager and a Kraxan warrior standing together, protecting both their peoples. The peace talks would continue, and thanks to 2 unlikely friends, they would have a real chance to succeed. 3 months after the failed conspiracy, Sarah stood nervously in front of the combined council of human and Kraxan relations. Her intern badge had been replaced with something much more impressive: Assistant Cultural Ambassador. "This is ridiculous," she whispered to Vexthor, who stood beside her in polished ceremonial armor. "I'm only 17. Age means little," he rumbled back. "Actions mean everything." The council chamber was packed with both humans and Kraxans. After the truth about the conspiracy had come out, both sides had realized they needed to understand each other better. And somehow, Sarah and Vexthor had become symbols of that change. "The Cultural Exchange Garden is ready for inspection," Sarah announced to the council, trying to keep her voice steady. "If you'll follow me." She led them to what had once been an empty greenhouse level of the embassy. Now it was something entirely new. The massive doors slid open, revealing a space where human science and Kraxan tradition had been woven together. Battle flora grew alongside earth plants, their shimmer steel leaves catching the light. Human students sat cross-legged on the floor while a Kraxan warrior taught them the basic forms of battle dance. In another corner, Kraxan warriors listened intently as a human botanist explained genetic structures. As you can see, Sarah said, we've created a place where both our peoples can learn from each other. The battle flora here is grown using both traditional Kraxan methods and human botanical science. The results have been amazing. She gestured to a particularly beautiful plant, its leaves swirling with patterns of gold and blue. This variety was developed by combining Kraxan warrior plant genetics with earth medicinal plants. It can heal wounds twice as fast as anything we had before. Vexthor stepped forward. And here, human students learn our sacred battle dances while we learn human sciences. Both make us stronger. A small Kraxan child, the first ever allowed in the human section of the embassy, was carefully watering a row of plants under Sarah's battle flora's protective leaves. The plant had grown enormous, its shimmering canopy stretching over a quarter of the garden. 3 months ago, Sarah continued, someone tried to use our differences to start a war. But look what happens when we work together instead. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a seed, one from her own battle flora plant. Walking to the youngest council member, a human woman, she held it out. This is how trust begins, she said, one small gift at a time. The council member took the seed carefully. Then, to everyone's surprise, a Kraxan council member stepped forward and held out a traditional warrior's bracelet to Sarah. You have shown us that strength comes in many forms, he said. You will teach others what you have learned. Later, after the council had left, Sarah sat with Vexthor in their garden. She looked at the warrior's bracelet on her wrist, probably the first ever worn by a human. Did you ever think, she asked, when you were bleeding in that maintenance tunnel, that letting a small human help you would change everything? Vexthor's laugh rumbled through the garden. Did you think stopping to help a dangerous alien warrior would make you an ambassador? No, Sarah grinned, but I'm glad I did. Above them, human and Kraxan children were learning to grow battle flora together, their laughter echoing through the garden. It was a sound never heard before in the history of their peoples. Sometimes the bravest things we do lead to places we never expected. And sometimes those unexpected places turn out to be exactly where we needed to go.